Welcome to See You on the Other Side, where the world of the mysterious collides with the world of entertainment. A discussion of art, music, movies, spirituality, the weird, and self-discovery. And now, your hosts, musicians and entertainers who have their own weakness for the weird, Mike and Wendy from the band Sunspot.
Mike, does it sound like I'm speaking normally?
No, well, it kind of, there's a little bit of like, did you put a bunch of cotton in your mouth or something like that before we started talking?
No, don't make me more paranoid.
Okay.
I had to go to the dentist this afternoon and I got some Novocaine and now I have that feeling that half of my mouth doesn't work.
Oh, yeah, that's the worst, especially when you try to eat.
Right. And I didn't consider that we were recording this until I was driving home and I'm like, I feel really weird. I hope I still speak weird. I even checked in the mirror a couple times to make sure that, half of my mouth wasn't like hanging open drooling because It kind of feels like it's that way. But
no, I'm looking at you on Skype right now. And the thing is, you can't even tell. You can't even tell that half of your face is completely bigger than the other half of your face. So that's the only reason that I even thought about the cotton. It can't even tell that it's fine. You look great.
Oh, okay, great, thanks. Well, but the looks. What's most important is that I sound normal, so people understand me.
You sound fine, and the listeners love cotton, so it's great. Okay.
All right, cool. Well, now I have a built-in excuse if I start stumbling on my words.
All right. So how was your weekend?
My weekend was really nice. Got to see my dad for Father's Day.
Oh, that's good.
Spend some time with the family. Yeah, and it was a beautiful day for hanging out and barbecuing and having a fire pit and whatnot. So that I enjoyed a lot. How was your weekend?
Good. I mean, it's all right. I did a lot of running and I did a lot of drinking.
Okay.
I just went to visit a bunch of breweries in downtown Minneapolis. And
okay. Which ones did you? I'm sorry, I have to know. Which ones did you go to?
Well, the big one was Fulton.
Okay.
I mean, so I'm always a fan of Sisyphus Brewing, but Sisyphus Brewing is right by my apartment. So that's like,
nice.
That's a gimme. Is that like Sisyphus Brewing? It's like, oh, we're just up there. But the trek all the way down to Fulton, which is in like the warehouse district, which is where they do with the technology and the startups are kind of in that area. And Fulton has a really nice brewery in there. And so
cool.
That was fun. So visiting there was cool. And I enjoyed a wide variety of their beers.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that sounds like a nice weekend.
Yeah, it was all right. And I did a lot of running, too, because I'm thinking about going to the Quad Cities Marathon in September.
The Quad Cities?
Yeah.
Are the Quad Cities DJs going to be there?
You bet the
the finish line, like pumping it up for you?
Yeah, the Quad Cities DJs, they run it themselves.
Oh, it's their marathon.
Yeah.
That's great.
And today when I was running, I listened to a bunch of Misfits songs because it's Glenn Danzig's 60th birthday.
Happy birthday, Glenn Danzig.
Happy birthday to Glenn. He's 60 years old. He's a pensioner.
Wow.
Yeah, that was crazy when I realized that Glenn Danzig was 60 years old. I interviewed him 10 years ago.
That's awesome.
And when
how was he? Was he nice?
Well, here's what happened. Like, you pick up the phone and flames actually come out of the phone, and you're like, "Hello," and then all of a sudden, like,
my ear burned off.
Yeah, it's like when Glenn Danzig's voice is the sound of hellfire coming out of his thing. No, he was very nice. He just sounded like a guy from New Jersey. He really just sounded like a very unassuming guy from New Jersey.
All right. Well, that's kind of disappointing.
Well,
I like the fire thing.
Yeah, that was more exciting because originally I picked up the phone with very trepidation, obviously. It's like what's going to show up in the caller ID 666-6666.
Right.
And I'm like, no, oh my gosh, Glenn Danzig.
Funny.
Right, and then just the devil horn, the little sign with the slash and the M and the other slash comes up, and that's what comes up for his caller ID.
That would be cool. I could totally imagine that happening.
Anyway, so I did that. I listened to Misfits to celebrate Glenn's birthday, and then I was thinking about the Quad Cities Marathon, and I know this is going to sound unusual, but I'm thinking about a costume for it.
Oh, is it one of those costumey races, like Halloween one? Or?
No, absolutely not.
What's the date of it again?
It's the end of September. So the last Sunday of September.
Okay.
But the reason that I couldn't stop thinking about a costume for it was I kept on thinking of me crossing the finish line dressed in that leotard that Freddie Mercury used to wear on stage. You know, the one that was like half black and half white and had a super low cut, almost down to his belly button.
It's a sweet costume.
Yeah, and I'd have to spray my chest hair black to make it really appropriate. And obviously, you know, like it'd have to be super tight so you could see everything. And
right, naturally.
I'd cut my hair and I'd shave my beard to a mustache. And with a cape, and I'm thinking of myself crossing the finish line, and I imagine somebody putting a little crown on my head and giving me a scepter and playing "We Are the Champions." And that really, like, that got me through like the last 2 miles of my run today.
That visual. Please make that happen.
Well,
Mike.
maybe
I
one day.
will hand you the crown and scepter, and I will bring a speaker with that song if you do that.
Well, I couldn't stop thinking. I was going through the logistics in my head. Like, how's that cape going to work?
Is it going to slow you down?
You know, it shouldn't be a fast marathon. You know, if I'm worried about time, like, I probably don't want to wear the cape. And also, like, how is the support? You know, and support is very important when you're running, especially for 26 miles. And do I want, are bits going to come flying around? You know, what's going on?
Right. How strong is that spandex?
Right. So these are things that I think about when I run. And also, how much would that leotard cost? If it's under $100, yeah. $150, I'd probably want to have a conversation about it.
Okay.
You know, I'd probably think like,
right. No, exactly. You got to.
I'm going to have to budget for my Freddie Mercury race costume.
That you'll wear once.
Right.
Well, actually.
Yeah, it could be every Halloween. But then you got to shave every Halloween anyway. So that's what I think about. And I don't know how to transition that into our guest.
It's okay. We're just, you know, I don't either. So why don't you tell me about our guest? Because
I interviewed Dr. Rebecca Housel. Okay. And she moderated a ton of panels at Comic-Cons and Wizards Worlds. So she worked for Wizard World for a couple years. And she's known as Professor Pop Culture because she's a professor. And she started using examples of pop culture and comic books and everything in her classes to try to get more people interested in her classes at the college she was teaching at.
Oh, that's cool.
And she wrote, and she's written a series of books. You know, True Blood and Philosophy, the X-Men and Philosophy. We talk a little bit about this, but
okay.
And we go into, I mean, it's really about the rise of geek culture, and that's like the first half of the interview. We discuss how, I mean, all of a sudden, I mean, comic book movies in the 80s were a joke. You know, until Batman, basically. I mean, comic book movies, maybe the Superman stuff in the 50s, but every live-action comic book movie was a joke for decades. And now they're the most popular things in the world.
Yeah, they're huge.
I mean, I haven't seen the second Avengers yet.
Me neither.
But you know, I like most of the Marvel stuff, and like those are the biggest movies of the summer. And like, why is that? And why are all of a sudden things that were geeky 30 years ago, like even the term geek has been reclaimed, you know, and a positive thing versus, you know, I mean, I guess I used to wear a T-shirt that said dork. So we're working on reclaiming.
I remember that T-shirt.
We're working on reclaiming all the words slowly but surely. So that's the thing. And so we kind of just cover that for a long time. And then we go into the paranormal influences on pop culture in history. So we it's the rise of geek culture and then how it relates to paranormal by the ending. So that's what we talk about with Dr. Rebecca Housel.
All right. Well, let's take a listen, shall we?
Mm-hmm. We are with Dr. Rebecca Housel, PhD, who is a author, a speaker, and known as the pop culture professor, in addition to being a real professor. So we'd like to welcome Dr. Housel to the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Mike. I appreciate it. I'm very happy to be here.
And I think a good way to start out would be, how did you get known as the pop culture professor? What inspired that name?
Well, it's really interesting. I was originally a professor at a technical college in New York. It's actually a rather famous one.
Okay.
I'm not going to give them a shout out because, you know, I don't work for them anymore. You have to pay me for that.
Right, and they have to pay for ad time on the show.
That's right. But I started off there as a writing professor, which is what I still do today.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing was, because it was a technical university, most of the students were only taking writing classes as a service class, as something they had to do. It was a requirement. So you had a lot of like engineers basically taking writing classes who were like, I don't even care about writing. Why should I even bother?
Right.
So I started to incorporate things like comics, things that I had interest in already, comics and, of course, superheroes, things like poker, Monty Python. I mean, I just went full on. I just did it. Anything that was a cult favorite, anything that I thought in video games, of course, I'm a big gamer. So anything like that, I kind of threw in there and into the course. And boy, did that course go. That course, they made me teach that course. I kid you not. In 30 weeks, I had 12 classes a
Wow.
year. That's a, by the way. It's not like a full load is typically 6 classes a year. So I was, because there was such a huge number of students that were like signing up for this class. So that's sort of how it started. And then I, of course, sort of teaching using pop culture. I started writing about it, doing research on the pedagogy of using pop culture in the classroom, and then it became more like commercial writing for the pop culture and philosophy book series. And next year I'm coming out with my own pop culture professor book series, so I'm very excited about that.
Okay.
But yes. So it's just been like that, and from the book, I ended up getting the Comic-Con gig, and I went on tour with a company called Wizard World in LA for 3 years. Working with different celebrities and talking about everything from the history of the supernatural and paranormal in pop culture, which goes back at least 12,000 years in written human history,
Okay.
to the Whedonverse, Joss Whedon and things like Buffy
All right. And Firefly, of course.
Of course.
Everybody's,
Right?
I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's favorite, the brown shirts. Talk a little bit about the, you've written True Blood and Philosophy, Twilight and Philosophy, and the X-Men and Philosophy. And I actually own the Doctor Who and Philosophy one.
Oh, very good.
That they and
Excellent.
that's a pretty good one. Tell me a little bit about how you integrated, philosophy into the world of, Magneto and Professor X and everything.
With superheroes in particular, the X-Men, for me, the reason why I got that particular contract was because I've been asking for it since 2003. The book came out in 2009, so it took me a while to get Bill to say yes to this. And X-Men was my favorite comic growing up because they had the most diversity, and they were actually really the first comic, besides Wonder Woman, who's essentially the creator's, based on the creator's mistress, Olive, a student of his, who was his dominant. He was submissive to her. So it's a great concept and everything.
Oh, man.
But you didn't know that. Yeah.
No, I did not.
Yeah. Yes, the whole when Wonder Woman ties you up with her rope, you have to tell her the truth. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. I guess I see it now. That's the lasso of truth. Okay.
That's right. You must do what she says. And that he actually came up with the lie detector. He's the creator of the lie detector, the creator of Wonder Woman, because of their BDSM activities.
Oh, man.
I know, fantastic.
I guess I thought about with the cuffs and stuff like that. She had. But I guess Wonder Woman does have that's a bondage theme right there with the cuffs and the lasso, and even the invisible airplane is kind of voyeuristic.
Oh, absolutely. The whole thing. It's awesome. And so, she's great and everything, but X-Men was actually the first comic that had Jean Grey was actually the first female character who had powers. It wasn't based on some male sexual thing. And
Sure.
And from there, they evolved so many strong female characters, like after Women's Liberation, Storm and Mystique happened, and they just, so many great characters came out of X-Men, like a female werewolf, Wolfsbane is a character from the X-Men comic. There's just so many. Selene from the Underworld franchise that Len Wiseman is pretty famous for, and Kate Beckinsale. Yep, she's from the Hellfire Club. which is from X-Men.
Oh, okay.
So like there's just I know, right? There's so many crazy connections. X-Men kind of rocked the world. And for me, growing up as a girl in the 70s, I was alone a lot, and not because I couldn't make friends, but because I didn't have any supervision really.
Sure.
And so I'd be like 5 years old, walking 5 miles to the comic book store with a bunch of change that I picked up on the way because it was the 70s and you could actually buy comics for change
right
at that time. And it empowered me. I learned to read with comics, and it empowered me. I felt I could be stronger. I felt like my weirdness, feeling like everybody feels like they're strange, but that maybe that weirdness is because I had superpowers, or
right. That's right. I mean,
that was special. Yeah.
I never thought about it before too, but really, I mean, the X-Men has a lot of strong women. I mean, now there's plenty of there's movies and pop culture with strong women, but I can see that the X-Men being one of the first ones. I mean, even though it's X-Men, they have strong.
Well, I haven't.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I just meant strong female characters. Is.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and I was going to say to you, it is X-Men. You're right about that, but that wasn't the original title. The original title was meant to be more inclusive. It was called The Mutants. But an editor at Marvel said to Stan, hey, because Stan was on tour with me for 3 years also with Wizard World. What an energetic guy. He's got to be 93 now. He celebrated his birthday in his 90th in 2013, I think, in Austin, Texas.
Oh, man.
At Comic-Con. So, yeah, no, I mean, it's been, for a girl growing up, basically in the projects, a little southeast of Boston, I really can't even say how amazing it's been working in the field, meeting people like Stan Lee. Anyway, an editor convinced Stan that the original title, The Mutant, should be changed to X-Men because X-Men was so much cooler,
Right.
It was the 60s, and at the time, that whole idea that the X factor was kind of a big deal because of secret government junk that was going on at the time, Area X and all this stuff.
Sure.
So it was kind of hot at the moment, and it was shorter. Shorter titles always sell better. And so that was sort of what the idea was. But Stan's original thought was, let's make this. Stan and Jacob Kurtzberg, or Jack Kirby, as everybody knows him, they were like, hey, we want to make this inclusive. So it's really interesting. The original thought wasn't to make it focus on men. Right away, it was an inclusive comic. Amazing.
I mean, as far as pop culture and mainstream acceptance of, everything from, the Marvel movies are the biggest movies of every summer, at least for the past few years.
Yeah.
And, you see, when you talk about genre television and everything, like, they're bringing the X-Files back, and, you have people, when I was growing up, and I'd tell somebody my favorite TV show was Doctor Who, like, there was like one person who'd heard of it. And, it'd be kind of like, well, that's cool, nerd. And now it's like something, like now you see everybody's, it's not weird to see a TARDIS t-shirt when you're walking down the street. And as compared to, 30 years ago, I would have been like, oh my God, like we're in a secret club. So, what do you think led to that this is kind of, the golden age of genre mainstream acceptance?
Well, I can tell you exactly what led to it if you really want to know.
Yeah, I want to know.
It's going to sound a little academic, but it really goes back to social theory, and social theorists started tracking modernism versus postmodernism. So World War II is the best example of what modernist thinking led to, that idea of the greater good, that the individual doesn't matter as much as the greater good. And so you could see with World War II, it's something like the Holocaust, that there's only one solution for everybody. Mm-hmm. And Hitler totally, made that awful by creating the final solution for everybody, which the world really agreed with. And they did, because it went on for 10 years until Germany and their allies like Japan and Italy started knocking on other people's doors.
Right.
Otherwise, they let mass murder happen for almost 10 years. So that's I mean, 12 million people were killed. It was more than 1 million people a year he was offing, and the world was like, oh, we don't know what's happening as long as it's not happening to us. So that was modern thinking. And after World War II, starting around 1950, this idea of postmodernism started to develop, and the best expression of that I can give you, where the individual matters more than the greater good. So it became individual focused. You can see it in movements. So after 1950, we see it in movements like the civil rights movement of the 1960s, the women's liberation movement that happened, shortly thereafter, basically, both here in the States and in England. But also today, you know about eye technology, the iPhone, the iPad, the iPod. The I stands for individual. And think about how you were talking about how Doctor Who 30 years ago, nobody knew what they were talking about. Imagine 30 years ago, do you think any household would have spent the thousands of dollars a year we do now on updating things like our phones? Nobody had personal phones.
Right,
now we
of course
all
not.
do. And kids, that everybody has one, and there's at least one computer minimum in each household. Mostly, almost every person in the house has a computer. There's multiple TVs. There's also iPads on top of it and iPods. And so everybody, personal electronics, the I in personal electronics have become huge. And the reason is because of this postmodern cultural shift. And we saw it in large social movements like the civil rights movement, like women's liberation. But it also filtered into things like pop culture. And part of what was going to happen to the postmodern cultural shift in attitude was something called parody. So that was predicted in the 70s by social theorists, and of course today some films like Dodgeball. I think about Adam Sandler films, Will Ferrell, Talladega Nights.
Yeah, right. Things that really send up.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. So it's become about the individual. So when it became less about larger groups and more about the individual, geek culture was bound to emerge because it's all about the individual, becoming an individual. And if a large group of people like Doctor Who, now who cares? We can all, as individuals, we can all express ourselves individually through our smartphones, through our iPad. Technology has really helped that along.
I was thinking about that the other day, actually, because Apple had their developer conference last week, and people get excited about the Apple developer conference, and guys like Tim Cook or before him Steve Jobs, like they get excited about a new device, like people would get excited about a new Beatles album, or
Exactly.
And so it seems like really has changed that the culture, the people who ran the culture, like in musicians or actors and things like that, or writers that used to direct us in a certain thing, have almost been superseded by, tech entrepreneurs. People. I think about Elon Musk. When he comes out with something, everybody pays attention.
Right. And individuals drive the culture. So the fans, it's now a fan-driven culture.
Mm-hmm.
Things like Kickstarter, it's allowing fans to say, hey, we love Veronica Mars. And that was last year. Veronica Mars came out. It was a cult hit, a TV show, and fans wanted to see it as a movie. And you hear stories like that, which are a total complete success, but they're all fan driven. So that's the thing that's amazing. Every time I'm at a Comic-Con and I have somebody like, for example, Marina Baccarin. I was working with her. I think this was last year. And somebody in the audience had said, I'd really like to see you as like this particular superhero character. And I said, you know what? Let's get on Twitter right now. Let's do it right now.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a really good way of looking at it, that as the culture did shift into focus on the individual, a lot of these, the themes that were coming through in, just think about classic themes from Star Trek or classic themes from the comic is about the triumph of, the individual person over the faceless corporation, or, how many, man versus machine. It's always the triumph of the human spirit is such a a basic theme in superhero work and genre work especially, that as the mainstream culture as the monoculture kind of divided up in the latter half of the 20th century, kind of the geeks took over. And I like that idea. That's a good one. I'm looking at some of the dates that, of different, panels you worked and things like that. And I see you were in here. I'm up in Minneapolis, so I see you in Minneapolis last May. And I know there was a lot of good panels, and then I see you got a great picture with you and John Barrowman, Captain Jack from Torchwood, who, I think he's great. And so of all these, who do you think has been, a couple of your highlights of people that you've worked with or got to interview and felt like, or moments where you're like, you could really feel these, actors and creators connect, in a, what's a thing like where you're like, well, this panel was where they connected so well. It's something I'll always remember.
I would say one of the best moments for me wasn't even something I did on stage. I was in the green room, and it was the first time that I had met Stan Lee personally. Like, I'd been around him. I'd seen him before, but the CEO of the company, John Macaluso, we were in the green room, and James Hong was there talking to me because he was one of my clients at Wizard World, and we were taking pictures together in the green room, which sounded weird, but I wasn't the fan. He was the one saying, "Come here, let's take a picture." I was like, "Okay." When James Hong tells you to take a picture, you do it,
right?
And so we're standing there taking a picture, and John comes in with Stan, and John says, "Stan, have you ever met Dr. Rebecca Housel?" And Stan was like, "I have seen Dr. Rebecca Housel. I've never met her, though." And so he's like, "Let me introduce you to the pop culture professor." And I don't know what to say. I fangirled. I looked at these people, and I was like, I can't. I said, "Can I hug you?" I wasn't being professional at all. I just hugged him. And I said, "I have to tell you this, Julie." I said, "You raised me. I grew up on X-Men comics. I kid you not." He took a step back, looked me up and down. I'm kind of famous for my boobs and my sort of sexuality. Like, I'm like a sex bomb. That's what Manny Bennett called me on stage once it really sucked. Sexual napalm. That's what he said.
Sexual napalm. Nice.
Yeah, I know. Stan Lee is looking me up and down. He goes, "Well, I can see I raised you well." It was fantastic. I burst out laughing.
Mm-hmm.
I was totally fangirling, and that was definitely a moment for me. I loved meeting everybody. There wasn't a single person I worked with that I didn't enjoy and have a great time with, and felt tremendously humbled and grateful and honored to be on stage with people that I grew up watching. Ron Glass was another moment.
Okay.
That might sound like a weird one, but he was Shepard in Firefly and Serenity.
Right, and he's also, Barney Miller. A lot of people would know him from Barney Miller, and he's just, he was even on a couple of episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. too, I think, last season.
Yes. Well, that was part of what was weird. Both Joss Whedon and I are I'm younger than him, but not I'm I think 4 or 5 years younger than him,
mm-hmm.
I think. So he had, the moment he saw Ron Glass, he had the same moment I did when Ron walked on stage. I was doing the Serenity panel with Summer Glau and Ron Glass. It was I think it was Columbus, Ohio. It might have been 2013. And this has never happened before or since. When Ron Glass, Summer came out, everybody clapped, and she sat down, and I was like, "Yay, isn't she awesome, beautiful, awesome, yay," everybody's clapping, it was great. And then Ron Glass was a little late. He comes out on stage after, and I literally, I'm not kidding, he started talking, "Hey, everybody," I began to cry because of Barney Miller. I remembered it was like a flashback from my childhood. I didn't watch Barney Miller, but my parents would have it on at dinner time, maybe even. And I just I never had that happen before. And I watched Happy Days my entire life, and I worked with Henry Winkler, which was awesome. And yes. Yeah, no, I mean, it was truly, he's inspirational to me, and I hope I get to work with him again because he's like awesome. I worked with Elvira, who I grew up watching, like I worked with so many of these people that I would like see them on TV and then they're in front of me and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. But really, Ron Lapis started crying and it took me by surprise because I didn't even remember that was on in the background in the 70s when I was growing up as a little girl. But like I heard his voice and I was like, I literally started crying on stage. I was like, he's like, are you crying? I was like, I am. And he came over and hugged me, and then I calmed down, and everybody could get back to the panel. The other moment that happened that
That's
was
awesome.
Fantastic, yeah, it really was another icon, Michael Madsen,
Mm-hmm.
and this was in 2012. I mean, I'm going back a little bit, but it was the one and only time he worked at Wizard World, and he worked with me, which I was really happy about. And we're on there, we're doing the panel, and I'm like trying to be cool, I'm like Michael Madsen, I'm freaking out, I'm like Kill Bill, and
Right.
Reservoir Dogs, Mr. Blonde, I'm dying up there, but I'm totally being professional, and all of a sudden he turns to me, he goes, what's that shirt you're wearing? I was wearing this designer top from Roberto Cavalli. I would often get something from the designer to wear on stage, and I'm wearing this. It was like a really beautiful top, and
Okay.
he's like, "Hey," it like stops the entire Q&A. It's like 150 people in the audience, and Michael Madsen stopping to talk to me. So he's like, "Hey, what's that shirt you're wearing?" And I'm like, I said, I just want everybody to know Michael Madsen just stopped this Q&A to ask me about my shirt. Okay, let me answer your question now.
Right.
I mean, and then he basically had a personal conversation with me in the middle of the Q&A because he liked me. And then after the show, my manager is there, who was, is also somebody that I was with at the time. And Michael Madsen's like, "Hey, is that your boyfriend?" I go, "No, it's not my boyfriend." He's like, "Okay, good." He's like, "Dude," he's like, "Can you come here and take a picture?"
Just like, yeah, no, that's not my boyfriend. No. That's funny.
No, technically, no.
Yeah, right. No, it's my manager. No, it's fantastic. And, how have you, I think you brought something up a second ago that, like a lot of these conventions and these panels and all the Wizards Worlds and Comic-Cons and stuff is that they bring the creators of the things that, we love, if it's, and genre TV is, it's people love it and I love it in a way that, I think we have a relationship with genre TV that we do not have with other kinds of culture. The relationship that we have with, that people have with, like you said, like Joss Whedon's shows, or that, I have that with Doctor Who. A lot of my friends have it with Star Trek. People have it with Star Wars. I mean, why do you think the relationship, and like you talked about, you had it with the X-Men. Why do you think our relationship with genre stuff is so different than our relationship with, Friends or, just like some kind of sitcom or something like that?
Well, this is, this is an interesting question. I like it because actually in TV land, in Hollywood, I guess I should say, because of technology, we were talking about how technology and postmodernism kind of work hand in hand, and geek culture, how it feeds into geek culture. This is part of it. This is part of that overall answer. What happened with television shows and with writing for television shows is that something like a sitcom, for example, that is meant for people to be very, very light. People do not have to think about it because they're working on their smartphones and they're looking at their iPads, or they're on their laptops and their smartphones and their iPads, and they want the TV on.
Right.
So it's an ADD culture, and things like sitcoms, we can't have a real relationship with it. Modern Family has a very big following. Things like Seinfeld, very, very, very big followings.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not meant for people to think. They're written for people to not have to think about. Shows like True Blood actually was voted one of the shows. It ended last year, sadly. It's 7th season, so it ran for 7 years, and it was voted one of those shows that you actually had to. You had to watch. you couldn't stop and do your Twitter.
Right.
You couldn't be, you had to really pay attention. It was a thinking show. And a lot of the geek culture shows that you're talking about, things like Doctor Who, they are shows that require Star Trek. They all require your full attention. Generally, we like to be engaged. And there's nothing quite like you mentioned Star Trek. I worked with, people like Patrick Stewart and met them. And of course, Captain Kirk, the ultimate,
right.
Kirk, I'm just amazed. That was amazing too. But that's a show that you just don't see anymore, in the sense that it's the thing that gives us hope. It shows humanity in a hopeful light. A lot of the shows that you're talking about in geek culture today, humanity is like not doing well.
Right.
Even things like Doctor Who, there's a lot of dystopian futures, and it happened a little bit in Star Trek, but overall, the idea of the prime directive of humans setting out to be explorers in the universe, to go and make the universe better, a better place, and to be enlightened and to educate, not to witness, not to make people
right.
change religions or something, not like early explorers on Earth, but actually go out there and learn, just for the purpose of learning, is something you just don't see anymore.
Doctor Who versus Star Trek, I always felt like that the Doctor Who was part of, post-colonial United Kingdom, they had a lot of dystopias in Doctor Who because of the fundamental difference of them feeling, the guilt of the end of the empire versus the optimism of the United States. And
That's right.
And so those really, and you're absolutely right. So Star Trek had that feeling of, optimism. And I was just about to say something like that because, the most popular genre show on right now, Game of Thrones, is about as non-optimistic as you can get. I
fell in love with, especially the female characters, Arya Stark. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So that's actually going to be one of my books for next year coming out, is the pop culture professor in Game of Thrones, and talking a lot about the history that George R.R. Martin uses, like actual human history. Obviously no dragons, which is sad.
Right, I wish it was.
Because they would have been so much cooler if there were. But things like that, and you're talking about popular TV shows and pop culture and things like the paranormal, which, Game of Thrones has, because they have people that come back to life, and basically zombies and a zombie race, and it's kind of interesting. But Walking Dead is another one of those areas that, in terms of the paranormal and which is basically anything that has to do with crossing over from life into death.
Right.
And that's zombies. It really all started with a vampire 12,000 years ago who was a god. But these zombies have, and that's another dystopian future that we were talking about, that sort of idea of it's really not the zombies. The zombies are people that become these mindless, hungry things.
Right.
Which represents the masses, that's us. That's our mindless, hungry hordes of these mass people. And in one, it's interesting how 9/11 affected how zombies are portrayed. And in terms of things like Max Brooks's World War Z,
which is a classic.
Came out.
Anybody that hasn't read that yet, if you were listening, once you're finished with this podcast, go to your library or go to the store or go to Amazon and pick it up, because it's the best zombie book ever, I think.
It's fantastic. I love it. I also love, of course, Isaac Marion's Warm Bodies, but because really it shows a shift, another cultural shift occurred after the 10-year mark from 9/11. 9/11 shook the foundations of the Western world, because humans were now the monsters. The monsters had to become our heroes. That's why zombies were vilified in things like World War Z. So it really reflects that cultural attitude about, people are the enemy. And in World War Z, they're really portrayed in a very like terrorists, basically, like something you get initiated into, and it's really, to me, always represented sort of a terrorist had a terrorist feel to it because it came on the heels of 9/11, and then after the 10-year mark,
Sure.
Isaac Marion writes Warm Bodies in 2010. I believe that the film came out in 2012 with Nicholas Hoult, and you see all of a sudden humanity wants to reclaim its heroism.
Well, I think, it's interesting how you're going, like you said, the change in 9/11 and also the change in zombies. So if you take, the first Night of the Living Dead and then all of the, the Lucio Fulci films and Dawn of the Dead, and, you go through that, and then there are no, zombies are never the good guys. There's never anything human about them besides the fact that they don't retain any of the humanity. They're just monsters. And by the time you get to Day of the Dead, they're trying to teach the zombie how to talk, how to shoot a gun, and the cycle kind of repeats again, even with the Return of the Living Dead series. By the time you get to Return of the Living Dead, a zombie is the main character, or a girl that's zombifying. And now, we're going through this where, you have, like you said, Warm Bodies, iZombie. It's kind of like the cycle into it. You have these dead as monsters, and the monsters eventually become the protagonists over, it's a cycle that's repeating over time. And I can definitely see that, September 11th obviously changed a lot of, pop culture, accelerated the cycle probably. I mean, think about it.
Yeah, the superheroes, yeah, for sure.
And you wanted to the idea also of, instead of our own government, think about stuff from the 1990s. It was always the U.S. government was the bad guy. If it's Will Smith in Enemy of the State or the X-Files or, that Hackers movie, anytime it was all these, all of a sudden, the people that work in the government and the CIA and stuff like that are the good guys again, post 9/11. You think about 24 and stuff like that,
Exactly.
You wouldn't have had a CIA agent be a good guy in the late 1990s because the CIA was considered, dark and evil and did things that were horrible in foreign countries. And whereas...
Oh, yeah. It's 100% true. And this kind of thing, what you're talking about, has been happening for literally hundreds of years. I mean, pop culture is an advent of postmodernism. But things like Arthurian legend and Robin Hood stories, they were used in the same way. Victorian England really re-embraced sort of Arthurian legend because of this culture at the moment. Robin Hood stories throughout our history, even American history, become very popular when there's big bad government. All of a sudden, there's a slew of Robin Hood movies.
Right.
Russell Crowe and, all these people are playing all these different, there's parodies of it. There's Carrie Elways, and it's just all of a sudden there's all these Robin Hood films, and that's really and that was just like you were saying, it was the 90s when government was, really not well liked.
But let's go a little bit to that. You said you talked about and have talked about the influence of the paranormal or the supernatural on pop culture, and you talked about that 12,000 years of it. So what's the first example that you think of that you can think of when something from the paranormal that influenced people 12,000 years ago?
Okay, so written language starts to evolve about 12,000 years ago with Devanagari. They're written from Sanskrit. In things like the Vedas and Upanishads, and so Vedanta is what Hindu is based on, and it's the oldest philosophy known to man, and Hindu is the oldest religion. So Kali was the goddess of life and death, who was the first vampire. She was called to earth by the other gods to defeat a demon. To the other gods, when they'd use their swords, to cut off the head of the demon, or basically cut the demon. Every time the demon bled, more would pop up, and the demons were populating the earth. So they had to call Kali. She used her fangs to suck out the demon's lifeblood, all of them, the population of them, and then used her very lolling tongue. She's often portrayed as having this lolling tongue, which sometimes indicates shame, and it's connected with the story because she actually lapped up all their bodies so that no drop of blood spilled. but she was in such a blood fury after that she was dancing in her field of victory and didn't even see that she was dancing on her consort husband. So,
Kali, no, and Kali's the god that they're worshiping in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, right?
So she's a goddess of life and death, and in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, she's portrayed as the goddess of death, really. But just like every religion, there's extremist groups, and she's basically Mother Nature. Mother Nature gives life and takes it away, but we tend to think of it in a very kind of, yay, happy, she's bringing us snow, and look at the flowers,
But Kali's not just about ripping out people's hearts.
No. She gives life and death. She's the all. She's sometimes thought of as Brahman, the whole reality. She's the universe. She's everything.
Okay.
So over the course of 4,000 years, the story evolved, and we start to see Adam and not Eve, but his first wife, Lilith. Lilith is his first wife. Many people aren't always aware of that.
Right.
When you think about, the divorce rate in the States is something like 50%, and there's no way we had a shot at having anything better than that, because the first man supposedly divorces his first wife and takes a second wife. So, 50% is pretty much where it's been for the last 6,000 years, essentially.
Right. So anybody who doesn't know what Lilith is that in the original story of Adam and Eve, Adam's first wife was, would you say disrespectful to Adam? She wasn't submissive enough to Adam.
Well, she was made from the same clay as Adam. She was his equal, so she wasn't disrespectful to him. She just was his equal. And when he said things like, "Hey, baby, can you make me dinner?" she said no. And he was really unhappy. Right. And he didn't want an equal. He wanted something made that was his submissive.
Right, and that's where the Lilith Fair, that's where they got their name from. And also in Vampire the Masquerade, Lilith is, treated as a mythical witch. And I think in Bordello of Blood, which is a Tales from the Crypt movie,
that's right.
Lilith is the main bad guy, portrayed by Angie Everhart. Like, it's the original vampire.
Yes,
Lilith.
Yes, I forgot all about that, actually. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I just saw Bordello of Blood again a couple of months ago, so it was just on the mind.
I love that. I love those kinds of campy. It's so great. And Lilith was, of course, a main character starting in season 5 of True Blood, where she was considered the first vampire because, of course, she is considered a vampire. That's the name Lilith in Middle Eastern languages sounds like this, Lolita. And Lolita Ba, which sounds, you can hear lullaby from that name, means Lilith is coming. That's where lullabies come from, to keep Lilith away. And actually what's also very weird is that sometimes
cool.
it's like a very interesting history, because she would come and she had threatened Adam when he did that. She was not angry. She was extremely angry, actually, that he threw her out and wouldn't let her back in. So she told him, she basically cursed him like any good woman would. A woman scorned, man, don't do it.
Right.
She just said, "I'm going to eat your children." Throughout the Middle Ages even, and they were all portrayed as women for the most part, until we get to John Polidori in 1818. I think was published in 1819, on that very infamous night where Mary Shelley, Percy Bysshe Shelley, Lord Byron, and John Polidori are all hanging around, drunk and high on opium,
right.
and there's a big storm outside, and they're like, "Oh, well, we have no electricity anyway, and it's stormy. We can't go outside and get drunk and high, so let's be inside and do it, and let's see who writes the scariest story." So Frankenstein comes out of that night, and so does The Vampire by John Polidori, which is based on Lord Byron. It was the first sort of Edward Cullen figure, at first Anne Rice sort of.
Right, Eurotrash.
Vampire. Yeah.
The Eurotrash vampire. And there's a great, talking about that night that Mary Shelley and everybody and John Paul, where they all got together. There's a great movie called, I don't know if it's a great movie, but I thought it was cool when I was younger, called Gothic.
Yeah.
That portrays that night. It's a British film from the late 80s.
Yeah, I've seen that film. That's a good. I see. Look at all these great. I could talk to you for hours about this stuff. Yeah, no, I mean, and now of course Showtime's Penny Dreadful, which I think that has basically Frankenstein, Dracula, things like Dorian Gray. Everybody sort of all in this big monster mashup, all living in the same, Dracula, of course, is almost 100 years or 80 years, basically, after Frankenstein and the vampire comes out, Bram Stoker's Dracula. So all of a sudden, everybody's living in the same time period, like Victorian England. And Penny Dreadful, of course, the title comes from the Penny Dreadfuls. They were these little pamphlets with horror stories, and one of them was called Barney the Vampire. Very famous one, and they were for a penny, and people would buy them, and so it's a very clever show, and it has it's very dark.
I mean, paranormal TV shows in the past 5 years obviously took off in a huge way, where, that's one of the biggest questions that I get, because I do a lot of haunted history stuff when we run a tour in Madison, and my sister runs the haunted history tour in Milwaukee. And, what do you think made those paranormal shows, took them from, something that maybe 20 years ago people would have made fun of or something, and today they are they're one of the hottest things in reality TV? Well,
it's again connected to 9/11, and sort of the idea that, especially when in 9/11 the U.S. we'd had terrorist things happen here, but they were from within. So it was an exceptional moment in human history, in the Western world anyway, to have that happen. And so many Americans died. And I think that the idea that there's life after death, and this sort of sense of where do people go, exploring it in a way outside of fictionalizing death through things like vampires and zombies and mummies and Frankensteins and all these dead things that are these creatures that are actually still alive. Now we have people that are actually dead. Where do they go? And so I think that was part of the kickoff, besides the fact that Grant Wilson wrote a letter, I think it was to the New York Times, and that's when the first Ghost Hunters show started, with him, after he wrote this letter to the New York Times, and people at Sci-Fi picked it up and got in touch with him and was like, hey, we want to do a show. You sound amazing. So
speaking of reality, the blending of reality and fiction, we talked about that, the Ghost Hunters. Have you ever had any kind of weird paranormal experiences happen to you?
What a great question. Oh my gosh, yes, I have. And it started for me with dreams. My grandmother, who cared for me, she was, basically like a parent to me. And she passed away in 2009, and it started with dreams from her, always taking place right before I woke up. And then about 2 years ago, I met a friend, a very important friend in my life. It turns out, he's actually one of my stalkers right now. But that's, kind of how it started. Yeah, no, he was a fan, and he became a friend. And it's a very weird situation, but he was a medium, and in fact, somebody that is a paranormal investigator. And we met through mutual friends, through my Comic-Con connections, basically. And because he's like a very strong medium, but and so when we kind of became friendly, it was very odd. All of a sudden, I was able to. I almost wondered if it was psychology at first. I really started questioning it, but then it wasn't just that. I mean, he could see them, but couldn't hear them. I could hear them. It was the weirdest thing ever. And he could see them. So when we were together, it was almost enhanced, and so many things happened when we were together. So many weird things happened, but I never experienced it the way he did. He experienced it almost like you'd seen the show Constantine. There's a person that can see ghosts, and they see them walking across the street like they're real. that's how he described it to me for him. I never had anything like that ever. I could hear things, that he could see it, and he'd be like, "This is what I see." I said, "Yeah, I can hear her." He'd be like, "You could hear it?" I'm like, "Yeah, but I could only hear it with he was there." Like it was almost like we were two halves of the same, like soul. You know what I mean? Like one half to see, one half to hear. So that was very interesting, and obviously he.
Or some of his powers rubbed off on you, like when you guys were together, or something like that, or you were able to
like that.
in tune.
I pick up feelings. I mean, I always thought about it as reading people. I didn't understand that it's maybe something like what you're saying too, possibly. I don't know. I just know that what I don't know is a lot. It's incredible, the amount of activity, but I don't see it really. But this was different. The house was totally dark. I'm sitting in my bedroom and I'm doing my phone or whatever, and I flip on my closet light, and I'm going in the closet. I have like a walk-in closet, and I'm checking on something in there. I'm packing a bag or something, and then I'm turning to go into the bathroom, which is in the master suite, and I kid you not. I mean, I know I was like in a weird state of mind. I was afraid, and the house was dark. But I really am not afraid of the dark. I walk around in the dark all the time. I don't even care. I just don't care.
Sure.
And I saw what was like, I don't know how to describe, like almost like a collection of white dots, almost like in like a man size. And it's in the doorway of the bathroom. And because I'm, unaffected, basically,
Was this collection like in the shape of a human?
Yeah.
I mean, did it look like somebody beaming up or beaming down or something?
I don't know about beaming. Yeah. I guess if we were going to go with Star Trek, yes, I would say it was like that.
Because you think about how they materialize.
Yeah, it was something like that. I didn't think about it at the time, but you're totally right. That's exactly what it was. And because I'm unaffected, which is part of, he was very affected. He was terrified of what he could see and everything that was happening to him. And I'm like, I don't even care, because I grew up abused, so I have dissociation like you wouldn't believe. I just don't even, it's like I don't even care. So I see this thing and I just like walk right through it because I got to use the bathroom. I'm like, I totally don't appreciate what's happening. And as I walked through it, I felt the person, and I felt like love. You know what I mean? I felt like incredible love, and I was like, "Oh my God!" I just walked through, I'm totally oblivious, and I just walked through this thing, and of course, it hasn't rematerialized since. Probably because I walked through it, or I should have not.
Right. And you're like, I'm out of here.
I guess it was probably disrespectful of me, but I had to use the sink. I mean, I had to wash my hands. I've got something on my hands in my closet. And I'm like, I gotta wash this off. So yeah, I mean, that was the first time in my life that I ever had that particular thing happen. Now I'm sad that I didn't appreciate it, because I think, what could I have done? Could I have communicated maybe walking to her, it was what I was supposed to do.
Yeah, I think it's hard to be mindful when you're faced with the paranormal. I think you have to have a lot of experience to be able to be that mindful when you're faced with something that you completely don't understand.
And I didn't even it was the lack of appreciation. I didn't mean to be disrespectful, but I think maybe I was supposed to walk through so that I think that was maybe ultimately, because I was scared, I got this feeling of love and peace, and then I was calm after that. And I wonder, because I thought
that was the message it was trying to get across.
I think so. I almost wonder if that was the message. You need to calm down and think about life a little bit. And you're in it. You're so in that survival mode that you just kind of. So I think that was actually, anyway, I think that was the message maybe. But it was cool as hell. I hope it happens again.
Yeah, well, I mean, that feeling, that idea that also that the things in the paranormal doesn't always have to be something we have to be scared of either. That a lot of times, paranormal things might be happening for a reason, and the reason might be that you need whatever's happening, and what you need, that message, or you need that comfort in that moment.
I think so. I mean, they're just people, really. When you think about it, it's your physical body has to die, just like a perennial flower, it's here, and then it goes away. And then what happens, then what happens? The body comes back. Maybe we come back too. We get reincarnated at some point. But in the interim, what happens to us? I mean, we are there.
Right.
We know it. We're not just a body. We're not just a bag of meat and bones. We're not. We aren't. It's not possible. So. And
that's what we try to answer in the culture we create and the things we like and stuff like that. So anyway, I got to say, Dr. Housel, I could talk to you all day. You're a fascinating person and a fascinating subject. It's nice to be able to have a chat about all of the things that I love. So thank you very much for joining us. We'll definitely do it again. You got to let us know when you're promoting anything like your new book or your new show and tour and stuff like that. So make sure you let us know about that. Anybody who's looking for your writing can find you at RebeccaHousel.com/blog is where your blog is. And we'll talk to you again soon. Okay, Rebecca? Hope you have a great day.
Thanks. Same to you, Mike. I appreciate it.
You bet. Bye. Since today's episode was about the rise of geek culture and the paranormal, we thought we'd do a little song about geek love gone wrong. If you don't know what the term catfish means, it's when somebody meets you on the internet and then completely lies about who they are and creates a false character for you to meet. And then when you meet them in real life, they're completely different. And it's from a movie called Catfish that was about that kind of thing with internet dating. Anyway, here's today's song, Catfished from Space.
I met her in an X-Files chat, joking about first contact. We talked all night about disclosure and abductees. We had so much in common, we bonded on Blake 7. She sounded like the perfect fracking geek. She found me every night online with a DM and a bottle of wine. She knew it all from aliens to Zadas. She said she was an ET, which was really sexy to me. I thought it was just a joke because she said she was from Alpha Centauri. I thought that was a code for a town in misery. She used to joke about ruling the human race. That's when I got catfished from space. She said she's an otherworldly monster that would come to Earth to slaughter, but she would do her best to help me to survive. She talked about her tentacles and 3 sets of genitals. I just thought she was a fan of hentai. Didn't care if she was pretty, I knew she was the girl for me. When she said her favorite cookbook was To Serve Man, scheduling a meetup so that we could hook up. She said she had the perfect place to land. She said she was from Alpha Centauri. I thought that was a code for a town in misery. She used to joke about ruling the human race. That's when I got catfished from space. When I woke from where I lay, it was like Independence Day. A big V mothership right over my town. The army put up quite a fight, but was gone by dawn's early light. That was the day humanity went down. It's not quite happily ever after, 'cause the planet's a disaster. But I'm the human pet that's closest to her heart. Like Battlefield Earth, post-apocalyptic scenario. I just wished I'd believed her from the start. When she said she was from Alpha Centauri, I thought that was a code for a town in misery. She used to joke about ruling the human race. That's when I got catfished from space.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. You can find us online at OthersidePodcast.com. Until next time, see you on the other side.
I'm going to have to budget for my Freddie Mercury race costume.